Hi, everybody. How are ya? Okay, how are you? Okay, all right. I know it's been a long couple of days, but it has been an extraordinary couple of days. And so I want to just first thank Nicole and the IWPR team for all of their incredible work. I know I've been so inspired by so much over the past couple of days, and it's really about what women's power can do and how we can all work together. And so I am really honored to be here with two of my dear friends and co-conspirators in the movement to give us a little hope today, but also, because we're the three of us, a little bit of action, I think. It was really important. So we'll introduce ourselves first. I'm Jordan Brooks. I'm the Executive Director of the United States of Women. We bring organizations and individuals together to share collective work on gender equity and move us forward. I'm going to turn it to Fatima.
Hi, I'm Fatima. Goss-Graves. I'm President and CEO at the National Women's Law Center and President of the National Women's Law Center Action Fund. And we fight for gender justice in the courts and public policy and in our society. And we also house and run the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund.
Awesome.
Hello, I'm Jocelyn Fry, and I'm the president of the National Partnership for Women and Families and the National Partnership for Women and Families Action Fund. And we work on a variety of economic and health issues that are really focused on improving women's lives and making sure that they can lead the lives that they want to live. It's great to be here with all of you.
So, the last couple of days have been incredibly inspirational, especially as we're building out of the pandemic, and especially as we are all trying to recover from the collective trauma of the 4 years of who shall not be named before the pandemic. And you guys have always been two people who have been really building with joy and with inspiration. And so I want to ask you, what were you inspired by this week?
So first of all, I should just say I've been inspired by Nicole's leadership because she somehow convinced all of us that we needed to gather. And for many folks who were kind of like, I think I can't come, they came because of Nicole's leadership and the work of IWPR. So that's one thing that has just inspired me. But I also have to say that I watched my friends and sisters, LaFonza and Cecile, in conversation yesterday, and I was reminded that we have what we need in this time. And sometimes we can forget that and really hyper-focus on all the things we're missing in order to win. But I was reminded we have what we need, and we actually know what to do. And the question is doing it.
Right.
So.
No, that's
good couple days.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I want to echo just the support for Nicole. This has been amazing, getting everybody out here to California, some of us across the country, is no easy feat, and we would not have done it for everybody. So it's great to be here. I think it's hard to hone in on one person. I will say one of the things that stuck with me is something that Dawn Staley said, and she told a story about how there was a point when somebody had suggested that the tickets for their game should be $1. And she said, no, it devalues the product to suggest that somehow coming to the women's games were worth $1. And it stuck with me because it is what we do for so much women's work, right? That we either don't value it at all, we sort of pretend that it's not real work, or that we expect women to somehow be paid less and be valued less. So I thought it was really a striking metaphor here, these incredibly talented athletes around people who should know better, but yet even they were willing to sort of devalue those women. And I just think it's striking because we all encounter it in different ways. So it really, and she was early in the conversation, and it really stuck with me the whole day.
Yeah, Dawn really stuck with me too, I think, just because we are all so deep in the policy world constantly, all the time, in Washington particularly, and sometimes we forget that these fights are happening everywhere. They're happening across sectors, and we all have to really remember that. Some of the other themes that I think that we've come across over the last couple of days one of which that I think we've all talked about, but is really important to me and to the work we do at the United States of Women, is partnership and collaboration. And the three of us and several others in this room do a lot of collaboration together constantly. And I think it's really the key to building power. And I want to ask you guys what you think about why it is so important to work together and how that actually helps us build power and how that's going to help us as we continue to move forward over the next several years.
So I think you never get anything done alone. And it's sometimes easier to go faster alone.
Right.
And I'm not going to say that's not tempting sometimes. Because the work of partnership and collaboration and community is also hard. Yeah. We have to just acknowledge that, because it means that you are having to listen to other folks' priorities. It means that you're having to create space. It means that you're having to pass the mic and add more mics, right? You don't have to approach this from some sort of deficit perspective. And I fundamentally believe that we have an opportunity, if we build together, to actually shift how it is that we think about power and women in this country. I mean, I think you heard in various iterations from folks today saying a version of, we don't have enough power to win in the way we want to win. Yep. We're not going to win by ourselves. But what I do know is that we have enough folks here who know how to organize, build community, build bridges, and that together we actually are the majority. Yep. Literally, we are the majority.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, you know, I always agree with you.
Always.
You guys have to know that Jocelyn Fry, I just have to say this. So, you know, Jocelyn Fry was one of the first people I met when I started at the National Women's Law Center. So this has been a long time friendship and mentorship and guide and close confidant. And I always agree with her too. So we're just going to be like, me too.
Right, exactly.
Agree.
Exactly. But, you know, but I think just building off of your point, I think we have to redefine what power looks like. Yeah. And we live in a country that often defines power in a very individualized way, right? And individual people amass a whole lot of money, a whole lot of power, and then deploy it the way that they see fit. Mm-hmm. And I think part of what I've heard people talk about is that we have to think about it differently and do it differently. If we try to do it the way people have done it before, we're not going to be successful because we operate in an environment where we're not supposed to be successful. So part of our ability to deploy our power is to operate differently. It means that we have to be willing to work together. Yeah. We have to be willing for some other people to lead and for us just to follow, right? And just listen to what people say. We have to be able to operate in community because we can collectively do that if we recognize that we're just going to do it differently. We don't have to follow those rules. Those rules don't work for us. And part of our ability to be successful is the fact that we are going to define it in our own way. So I think collaboration has to be a part of it.
Yeah, and I think about a moment over the last couple of weeks particularly that has just been so joyous, but also such a collaboration, is the passing of Judge Jackson as now Justice Jackson, and led particularly by these two women and a number of other Black women-led organizations across this country. And the thing that was so important for that was that it was an entire movement piece of work, but really led by Black women and other organizations coming together to say, how can we be helpful? How can we make sure that we're collaborating with each other? And the Black women who have been doing this work for years and years and years were leading. And that is one of the most important things. And now we see one of the big wins over the last, several years, one of the few wins that we've seen in Judge Jackson. We're so excited about that. I think the other thing that's important, we've talking about power, is that over the last several years, especially when we were fighting against the constant battles that we were continuing to fight, so many people have come together across movements, which I think we weren't always seeing before. When you saw the really terrible things happening when Trump was, not allowing people into the country from a whole host of different countries. People put their bodies and their lives and across movements on the line to say, no, this is not going to happen. And I think we have to continue to think like that as we push forward positive change.
Yeah, So there are a few things that are terrible that are baked into the cake in this moment. And when Justice Ginsburg died and was replaced by now Justice Amy Coney Barrett, that shifted the court in a way that's a generational shift, right? There are a range of things that are baked in. And that does not mean that we roll over and say, well, wake me up in 20 years when something is different.
Yeah.
And I know folks are tired. I hear that all the time. But I also really believe deeply that the pathway out of what might feel like exhaustion is an ability to dive in and make a difference. Like that is, the pathway for you might also be Netflix. I'm not saying don't
And
do
it is
Netflix.
sometimes for me. Yeah.
Right. But your ability to be a part of something bigger than yourself, that is always a thing that's going to make a difference.
Right. I mean, absolutely. I think we also just have to be willing to, first and foremost, take care of ourselves and each other, right? We all are tired. We feel tired because we are tired. This has been exhausting. The pandemic's exhausting. The 4 years that we don't want to talk about were exhausting. Like, all of it takes a lot out of you. But at the same time, you have to dig deep and just recognize you don't have to solve it all at once, right? That's not how the race is won, right? Like, you just take it one step at a time. And, whatever you can do is something worth doing. And sometimes you lean on Fatima, lean on Jordan. Next time, it'll be the other way around. We have to be willing to lean on each other. And we have to be willing for folks to acknowledge that we are human, right? We are not, I find it is nice when people say Black women will save the country, but quite frankly, that's a whole lot of pressure, right? Right. And we shouldn't, I acknowledge that there's some amazing Black women who are saving the country, but that's not what our solution should be. And it often means that Black women are not taking care of themselves, like just women generally, we put ourselves last. So I think, yes, we have to be positive, we have to be optimistic. We have to recognize that, we will get through it. We have to work together. But we also have to take a moment sometime to say, you know what, I just need a break. It's okay. And we have to say that for ourselves and own that for ourselves.
So it's so unbelievably true as we all grapple with what Cecile was calling the scary stuff that is about to happen and is happening constantly every day. But it is moments like this when we're all in spaces together where I feel a lot of that energy and get a lot of that energy myself. And I think I got a lot of energy yesterday from the Attorney General, Tish James, and her incredible just energy but work that she does. And the intersections that she said of gender and race and poverty and how she's making sure that we are working on all of those things together. And she did say to us, we've got work to do. Mm-hmm. So what are we going to do? And how are we going to get there? My friends in the movement here, what should everybody in this room do when they leave this room today?
Yeah, and I just want to acknowledge that A.G. James was in conversation with our sister Glenda Carr, who, when I think about Glenda's ability a decade ago to dream about the political power of Black women and name a range of things that many of us were like, I don't know that that's happening. And now we're sitting here with a Black woman VP, with a Black woman on the Supreme Court. She and Kim were sketching out those dreams and living into them. So one thing I'll say is just dream a little bit when you live here.
And follow Glenda wherever she goes. She's amazing.
It's true. Follow Glenda. But I'll give two other things. The latest data we have shows that only about 30% of people actually believe that Roe will be overturned. It will be overturned. And I say this as someone who is deeply wedded in my bones as an attorney who has respect for institutions in the court. They're going to overturn Roe. Yep. And so that sounds scary, like the scary stuff. That is scary, right? And the question you have to ask yourself is, what are you going to do about it?
That's right.
And it's the question all of us need to be asking ourselves every single day, convincing our friends and families and partners who are like, it's probably not going to happen, and if it happens, it's going to be okay. It will be overturned, and what are you going to do? And that, I hope, will prompt you to participate in the unprecedented amount of activism I think we will see over the summer, to support local abortion funds, and to show up and vote this fall. That is what we need.
Yeah.
Agree.
Always.
Agree, always. I would say a couple of things. One is, I'd say to everybody here, just pick one thing, right? Like I can't tell you all the same thing, but just pick one thing and commit yourself to doing that thing, over the next couple of months. Just do that. And the second thing I'd say is find somebody, a woman that you don't really know but is doing stuff, and ask her, what's the one thing I can do for you, right? Like not everything has to be done by you, but part of our, I think, charge is to be supportive of other women and to follow their leadership. So I would do those two things. The last thing I would say, is from a care perspective, that we all have to continuously talk about the value and the essential role of care, not simply in our families, but in our economies. I think that one of the reasons that we devalue care is because women do it, right? And particularly women of color historically do it, and so we think it's not valuable. But I think that part of our challenge is to fundamentally redefine the value of care, not simply monetarily, but also just in sort of spiritually, like all of the things. Like our strength is found in care. We treat care as a weakness, but I think care, in a strong investment in care, is really our strength. It's a strength in our families, it's the strength in our economy, it's the strength in our nation. But we are being sold a tale, right? Like people want us to forget the pandemic and all those things, as if it's not really as important as it is, because we just want women to keep doing it, right? So I think that's the third thing I would say, is talk about why care not simply is important, but why it's of value, and it's a value that we ought to be investing in every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of that is telling your story. That's the one thing I would say. For every one of you has a story, about whether it's about care, or whether it's about reproductive rights and abortion, whether it's about violence against women. Tell your story, because the stories are so important as we continue to talk about why policies are so important. And the other thing is thinking about all of these issues that are going to happen and are currently happening and we are pushing for every day. The point of voting in all of your local elections is also that you are actually actively figuring out where those people stand on these issues, on care, on abortion access, on violence against women issues, on voting rights, on canceling student loans, on all of these things that we know people need over the course of, our lives in order to be able to build to an economy that, thrives for women and girls. And so make sure you're checking on those things. We've heard everybody's moonshots over the last couple of days, and so in the little bit of time we have left, Jocelyn, Fatima, what are your moonshots and how do we get there?
Well, I think I would just piggyback off what I said earlier. I feel like the moonshot is different for every person. For me personally, it is around, investing in care policies. And, for me, that starts with, yes, paid family and medical leave, paid sick, like all those things are important, but it really starts with focusing on how do we value care and talking about why it's important, talking about why it's essential and is something that is a source of strength and not a source of weakness. And so for me, that's what I want to do every day. It's what we should do every day. If we solve the care problem, we solve so much of what women need.
That's right. Fatima?
So I believe that it is actually possible for women and girls in this country to be able to live and work with safety and with dignity. And I just think that it is possible and that we are on a tipping point around it in this country, around when it happens. But so my moonshot, I guess, is that both our culture and all of our institutions, our workplaces, our schools, our politics will reflect that.
Yeah. I think mine is that we really think about how we could build to a vision of a country that is not just better, but it is what we want and what we can get so that the entire population of this country can actually thrive. And how do we get to a place where we are holding our leadership accountable, being bold, being brave to say, no, actually, this is what women and girls need across this country, and we are going to fight and vote in the way that we know is going to make that happen. So I'm hoping we can get there over the course of the next year and beyond. We'll see. We can do it together. I know we can. The last thing we want to tell you to do, ask you, please, to do today is tell us what your moonshot is and tell us how you're going to get it done. So if you would all, every single one of you, before the end of the day today, as you're on your plane home or wherever you're going, send an email to powerplus@iwpr.org and tell us what your moonshot is and tell us how you're going to do what the one thing is that Jocelyn wants you to do and we all want you to do. Because we're going to hold you to it. Because it is really important to make sure that we are all coming out of this today with some really concrete actions to do. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for having this beautiful space, this beautiful community together today. Thank you to Jocelyn and Fatima for being here with me. And thank you to Nicole and the IWPR team for all of their incredible work. You guys are awesome. Thank you.